All right, hey guys, Kid here, Burn One, Shadowverse Evolved channel. I'm actually joined with my good buddy and constant guest on the stream, or not streams, the channel that is, Prescia. I want to say hi.
Howdy.
We're here to bring you our mad concoction. I don't
Yeah,
of
the
Tempo
madness.
Haven.
Yeah.
We both took this deck to the Grand Showdown, and then I was able to luckily hit all the right matches I went to see and avoid the ones I didn't to be able to hit top 32. Unfortunately, kind of lost the first round in top 32. But the fact that we were able to put this list together and it's very out of the box thinking, I believe, like I feel like no
Yeah.
one else was really doing exactly what we were doing with Haven at the moment. But there's just so much like sweat and blood was put into this deck.
Yeah.
You have we spent like what, a month on this, right?
Sweat, blood, and doom.
Dude, yeah. Oh man, I wish some of you guys were there to see us like days before we were still going at the list.
Bro,
And like
Thursday,
okay.
Thursday, I was like, nah, this ain't it, G. I was like, no, dog, this might be the worst thing we've ever made.
It was even almost the day before we were just both gonna jump ship. I was just like, yeah, screw this, I'm going back to Pixies. What was I thinking spending a month on this list?
Yeah. No, but it in the end it paid out. Kit got top 32. I don't know. I ran into a cheater, and then the second match was just a rough one. But I'm happy for Kit. It was fun to put the whole deck together, and we'll talk about it in a second. But yeah, I think I messaged you like what 3 weeks ago, and it was like, "Am I on crack or is this the play?" and we were like, "Yeah, I think this is the play."
Yeah,
And
it was such a weird scenario because like you messaged me and like it's always been in the back of my head about like Haven again and like the floating stuff and other things like that. But every time I thought about it, I was just like, no, it just goes nowhere. Like the only good thing is Marwynn.
Yeah.
Like that's it. That's all I could think of. And then Prescia, like I said 3 to 4 weeks ago, he's like, I want to try something. Is this the play? We play a bit, and I was like, oh, this might have legs. Let's mess around with this a little bit more to figure out like, one, why was Japan not playing this, and two, like, are we crazy or not? Like, we obviously did the whole grind of literally every like top tier matchup we could think of to see like why was this deck bad and like how can we make it better basically, and like to the point where we felt confident enough to bring it to the Grand Showdown, and thinking we could at least like win the event or top 8 with the list and so forth.
Yeah. I think another aspect for me was I was pretty resigned to the fact, like, in my opinion, this is the worst meta we've had in the game. I didn't want to play Kuan Mirrors the whole day, and I really wanted to find something different. And I was like on that path from almost minute one this set coming out. And I don't think that this is like, it's obviously not like the strongest deck in the format. It's not, I wouldn't even say it's like a top 5 baby, but it's really strong against some of the top decks, and that's what we were targeting. We thought, hey, most of the people are going to bring Kuan. We were right about that, and we thought that this matchup or this deck had a pretty good matchup in the Kuan, but we can kind of talk about that later.
No, yeah, for sure. I like, just to add on to that a little bit more too. It's like I think we didn't really pick this because we thought it was the best deck. We just thought it was at the time the most like silver bullet. Like this hits everything we want, and it felt like we didn't necessarily have like some overwhelming advantage into a lot of matchups, but we had an okay matchup into everything. So we felt comfortable enough to be able to at least pilot this through a Swiss round and hopefully make it out, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but with all that little introduction being said, we'll go ahead and hop right into the deck here. All right, so we're actually going to be showing you the initial list that was put together when Prescia came and was like, am I crazy or not? This is what he brought and was testing against me a lot. I guess, Prescia, since, I mean, obviously you first decided to make this list, you want to talk about it first?
Yeah, so I was looking through a lot of the JP lists that were winning random like tournaments and stuff. And there was a lot of the Karula lists, and I kind of went on this idea like, hey, Marwynn is really hard to deal with for Kuan. And if we could just figure out the right shell for the rest of the deck, I think it might have some legs, just being like, hey, Marwynn on 4, skip turn, and we have this big guy that can't be dealt with. We saw this last set where Lashena was like pretty unplayable because it had no options into control Haven because Marwynn was so relevant and Aegis was so relevant, and they have no ways really to interact with Aura. So I kind of applied that thinking to Kuan this set. Obviously, they have more tools, they have more guys, they have more rushes. But similar thinking. So this is basically an amalgamation of like a lot of those lists. So you see like the Dark John, the Deus Ex Machina, that's kind of absent from the current or the final list. But we were thinking that, hey, we just need options after the Marwynn turn, that we skip turns, so that'd be our turn 6. So our options were like Karula Evo, which is really weak, John Evo, which is really strong, and then Deus Ex Machina, which is like into some matchups, and then Dark John, which is sort of the finisher in theory. But as I was testing against Kit, a lot of the cards like Deus Ex Machina and Dark John felt really weak. Dark John, I think, am I right? I think Dark John was like our first cut. I feel like we just threw that out pretty fast.
Yeah,
right?
Dark John was cut so quickly because we were never in a board. It was like nice having a like semi extra board clear, and maybe like it pushes some extra damage to close out the game, maybe on turn 7 or something. But the biggest issue was it like never. It was like it felt like it was such a half measure into everything. It was like half board clear, half damage pushing. It never felt like we could have like things on the board as well to really take advantage of some of the Dark John's effects. And then I know we didn't come up with this because I think we cut this super fast, like literally day one. But I'm sure there were some scenarios where, like, in some matchups, we do have to choose to ward Marwynn or not. And I believe there are some scenarios where Dark Jeanne, after like a turn of them swinging into Marwynn, it means our Marwynn will die. So
Exactly.
It never came up in our testing because we cut so quickly. But I'm sure there's obvious, really big scenarios with that. I think one of the big things to touch on too that Pressure was saying as well was that the big thing that I think really pushed the deck over the edge for me in testing and stuff and realizing it was good was that the play pattern of Marwynn into a really great 6 drop turn, which was really important. Like the turns where in testing where he was able to follow up with a Jeanne felt backbreaking because the Marwynn is 10 health. It's just so hard to get through. And a lot of times I think what made this deck, or the deck idea and like the whole quote unquote tempo of Haven, like the Marwynn tempo stuff, really good in this meta is this is one of the few metas, I think, or maybe not one of the few, but this meta felt like the majority of decks that wanted to compete were either had a really slow start and had explosive turns later, or just wanted to get to the late game, which meant like the first 3 turns of the game were never really too pressured. The only decks obviously pressuring us would be like Sword or Aggro Abyss, which I think we quickly figured out when playing the deck. We can just out-resource them until they can't play the game anymore, and everyone else we can play our tempo game plan.
Yeah. I just noticed this list has Acolyte's Light and Phantom Blade cut off. Obviously, those 2 were in the deck, though.
Let me fix that really quick.
We can fix that on the real list. But yeah, it was very fun, like booting this list up, going like, hey kid, let me just try this, and it felt like pretty good. Even the losses. There we go, little audible.
Yeah, listen, do it live.
It was like, okay, we see the lines, we just need to adjust a little bit. One last thing about Dark John is that one of the other aspects that I sort of disliked about her is we just don't have, especially in this initial list, don't have a ton of board presence that will not just get killed by Dark John, right? So it's like Boost Kicker literally gets killed. Karula and the other guys that evolve will stay at 2. The Marwynn is sick, right? Because it'll go to like a 10-6 or whatever. But like Kit was saying, it makes it weaker. And we kind of just realized like Marwynn is just like, we just want to swing as much as possible with Marwynn. So we should just do that. But this was the initial list, and it went through a lot of changes. But, the final list.
I guess before we just hop over to the final list, I guess we could also talk about some of the other reasons we cut stuff, right?
Because I forgot Focus wasn't.
Focus. Okay, like this is such a weird card. Focus I actually really like as kind of a card design, but then you start playing it and you get into the game scenarios where we're like top decking to win the game, and you top deck focus, and it was the worst top deck in our lives every
Yeah.
time that happened. And this happened more often, obviously playing it. What made a super doomer pill about this deck was control abyss and like hand
Yeah.
ripping and stuff like that. We were often in that matchup forced to like play with a 1 to 2 card hand at most at any point. So every time we top deck focus was horrendous because they could rip it out of our hand before we could play it, or like we just need to top deck anything to win the game, and we're top decking focus, which doesn't let us draw a card on our own turn or even heal on our own turn. And when we finally made this change, Pressure brought up a really great point. When we made the change of removing focus, was that a lot of times focus was a 2 play points, heal 1, draw a card, and do nothing else. Yeah, like I think the initial idea we had of focus, and after playing it at the beginning, was like really, it felt really good, and it had helped with the consistency a little bit, and a little extra heal on top. But those top deck scenarios where we just need to be drawing like banger after banger off the top, it made those turns horrendous.
Yeah. I think another thing is, we identified pretty quick that the worst matchup by far, it's unplayable, is Control Abyss. And this card, like you were saying, not only just feels bad when you top deck it because we have no cards in hand, it also gets completely shit on by rule die because it
Oh, then it
adds a
costs
play point
1.
we have to,
Yeah.
yeah, we have to spend. I will say, I think like in a list like this where, well, I guess no, because we swapped the, I guess the next change is we swapped the black the 8 angelic snipes for black and scripture basically.
Yeah.
And I was about to say like we have more quick stuff. And in this like specific list, we would be holding more mana up than normal, so focus would make more sense in that aspect. Because I think in the final list, we're only floating stuff when we have Karula out or we're doing Marwynn and we have acolytes in hand.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but we swapped the angelic side for black and scripture. That was because we identified, pretty quick that Yuzuki and just control abyss in general is really rough, and we want to stop them from getting to Necrocharge 10 really fast. And also, black and scripture is really strong against the early game paper shikigamis from Kuon, just stopping them from getting their engine online. And we were just like, do we need 6 basically angelic snipes, because counterattack is a little bit of angelic snipe? But yeah, what I'm trying to see, what else did we cut from this list? I guess Aether, but we were just playing Aether because of Dark John and Deus Ex Machina, right?
Yeah, pretty much. It was just like a cute turn 7 play of like that, pull out Deus Ex or Dark John for game, or
Yeah.
Deus Ex kind of helped us like float more if we needed it. I guess one thing to note too is like when we did make this change, I guess it's less often Karula's going to come up to be able to like pop something with his last effect, which is float 6. It comes up occasionally. I don't think it came up ever during the tournament that day, but in a testing, it did happen, especially into the slower control matchups. Sometimes we just needed to like have an answer to the board and still be able to float a bunch. So if they play any big bodies afterwards, we could just Acolyte's Light and then play our Marwynn in response afterwards.
Yeah.
I think that's like part of the reason why, like personally, I think Brescia kind of agrees. Like the reason we call this Tempo Abyss is that a lot of our followers actually aren't very powerful at the end of the day. It's just Marwynn, and the way we take control of the game is by we have these good value followers and on the board that don't necessarily push a lot of damage, but they add a lot of resources and tempo in our favor, letting us respond to our opponent to remove their threats while keeping our mini threats on the board. That's generally the game plan, especially when you miss Marwynn or you're playing for the elongated game plan to out resource your opponent to victory that way.
Yeah. I agree with that for sure. I think. Oh, I guess did we talk? I guess we didn't really talk too much about like why we cut Deus Ex Machina, as we just like barely touched on it. But for me, it was just way too much of a win more card, where it was like if we're winning and we have Karula out, yeah, we just completely destroy them if we drop the Deus Ex Machina. But it was horrendous if we were behind or didn't even have Karula at all.
Yeah.
We kind of considered it against like Control Abyss, because like being able to just like basically refresh our hand and go to 4 kind of was nice, but it's also just does affect the board in any way. It's only a 4/6, which kind of nice, it's better than being a 5/5,
Hmm.
but it's like 2 cards, and we're not really getting anything um, if we don't have the other float stuff in hand, which that was my initial, like, um, when we did, like, the card review, right, and stuff, or the set
Yeah.
reviews, like, with Karula was like, these cards are only good if you have the other cards in hand, and I think Karula, I still agree with that assessment, but he does do, like, he draws you cards, so it's like, nice. But Deus Ex Machina definitely is the most accurate statement, or is the best example of that, where it's like she does nothing if you don't have Acolyte Sleight in hand. Like, she's really terrible. But yeah,
Yeah, it's one of the things too, like when we were looking at Deus Ex Machina at one point, because we went back to test just like I think like a handful of games really quick, because we
yeah,
were struggling so much against Control Abyss, and we thought that because they're hand ripping us down to almost no cards when they hit like the perfect curve of discards and stuff like that, because they can get away with it a little bit because we don't necessarily always pressure the board early. So instead of spending their resources to remove board slot or followers on the board, they use their resource to discard a card out of our hand, right? Especially
yeah.
like if they turn to that scythe card. I forget the name of the card right now. Yeah, it deals like 3 damage, or you can make them discard a random card. Like that felt really bad every time the matchup we were playing into that matchup, and they just were able to curve that on 2.
Yeah, yeah, that
And
card is toxic.
yeah, so we thought maybe Deus Ex Machina in the matchup would be good because we'll have no card hand, play Deus Ex Machina off the top deck, draw 4 new cards, and we're kind of back in the game. After testing it more, that was not true.
It would be because it got ripped, because it's like, because it needs to be at the top. It's like Jerry. Like, you
Yeah.
might as well just play Jerry instead of Deus Ex Machina. But yeah, I really don't like this card. It's just, it's way too win more, and what we were going for with this deck was like trying to make it as consistent as possible. And we'll get to that when we get to like the final list, but like in a lot of our sort of notes and stuff. But w- my goal and our goal was like for me at least, like I didn't want to play fairies because it was just a complete luck sack, inconsistent mess, and I didn't want to play Kuan because I felt the mirror was that same way as well, just very random, and whoever drew better. So I wanted to make the most consistent deck possible for the game plan we choose. And Deus Ex Machina is not consistent and does nothing for a game plan unless we are already winning, and I really did not like that. So
Yeah, I think you touched on it too a lot. Like I was kind of in the same position, whereas like I already like locked in fairies. It's the deck I grinded to dust
yeah,
in the beginning of this meta, because I knew like if I'm not gonna play, if I don't find anything else to play, I'm just gonna play fairies and call it a day. But I think you also hit all the good points too about like this card, and you'll see the difference when you go to our list. Every card, like a lot of cards in this list need like 2 cards to be really good.
yeah,
But in our list, once we figured out exactly our game plan and everything, it turned into like every card is just good by itself. And we
yeah,
don't need
exactly.
another card to make it better. But if we happen to have another card, it could push the cards even, better. Because like that's the one of the big issues you talked about too with Float Haven stuff, is that we need to have other cards in hand to do something with those play points. So yeah, I think
Yeah,
that
I think
kind
I think that's a good. I was gonna say, yeah, I think that's a really good way to say that. It's like this list is you need 2 things for it to be good. Our list is we need the thing for it to be good, and if we have the extra thing, it's broken.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's how
So
it feels sometimes when
yeah,
you get a good start in our list. It sometimes it does feel like, even though the board state doesn't look incredibly scary for your opponent, it actually on your end you feel like you're in an amazing spot, because your opponent will just see like that's a 3-3 and a 2-3. Like what? How am I going to lose to this? And then they just lose the game because you have the tempo and the control where anything they play is just not going to stick around before you can start swinging with your little guys.
yeah.
But I think that kind of covers up this list, right? I think
Yep.
there's nothing else we're talking about.
No, into the vault.
Yeah. Okay. After like a month of testing together, this was the madness that we ended up on.
Yeah, this is the final list. I think the very final edition was the Sacred Plea. I guess we
Yeah.
kind of want to talk about everything in order, but I think the Sacred Plea was just like it's fresh in my mind right now, so I kind of
Yeah. We can talk about it. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so the Sacred Plea we swapped just 1 for 1 with Focus. because like we were saying, his focus is terrible against Control Abyss. And that Thursday, I was like, okay, kid, we got to play more Control Abyss games because like I'm scared. And he beat the shit out of me. I mean, it was like turn one, the discard card, discard is refill. And I was like, why I have like 3 games? I'm like, how am I supposed to play the game? And so I sort of was thinking about how I was very much on like, okay, PTP just shits on Control Abyss. I still agree with that. I still think PTP and I've thought this since last set when I did the Ramp Dragon list, because I was expecting a lot of Control Abyss in that tournament. And I was like, okay, I sort of thought about how Sacred Plea is like better than PTP because we don't take the damage, so it's better into like the aggro matchups. Because yeah, PTP is sick with the board clear, but a lot of the aggro matchups are have out of hand damage. It's not just the damage on the board is all that exists, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, if we could go like PTP, drawing two Blackened Scriptures and Acolyte's Light or Surefire or whatever, that's sick. But that's asking for a lot. So taking 3, we don't like to see that. Also, I mean, I think at this point it's not like too hard to play around the PTP. Obviously, like if we just drop it from 9 to 6, then yeah, they won't expect it. But if it's on the board, but anyway, so I was thinking like, okay, Sacred Plea might be interesting because we could just play it down and sort of stock this like draw 2 against Control Abyss, where once they play all their hand out, once they play their their discards out, we just crack, draw 2. Now we're over resources on them because all of their discards are 1-for-1s outside of Silent Purge. Like they have to play a card out of their hand, and we lose a card basically. So I was sort of just like, okay, as long as we're ahead on resources, we'll be able to win because our things can deal with their guys. Our Karula can kill their thing. We have like Lucy and stuff, which we'll talk about later, but we have some bombs. But I was just like, okay, let's just stock this draw 2, and then every other matchup, it's literally just 1 mana draw card, right? So I don't know. I for my games, it came up in that first game against the cheater, but I don't know how many times they come up against for you.
Okay, so I'll talk a little about one of the reasons I was sold on Sacred Plea over Focus was one, Focus was miserable, the top deck. But one of the biggest points that Pressure pointed out pretty early on when we were like literally coping super hard.
We were, yeah.
I hope you guys realize how much mental anguish we went through building this deck.
I was getting so angry, dude. It was not good. It was not good.
So Sacred Plea seemed like a really good alternative, and like it all made sense. But the biggest point that sold me even more on Sacred Plea is that if we open this in our opening hand, honestly, our deck doesn't have a lot of 1-drops we even care about playing on turn 1. Yeah. So Sacred Plea being another one other than like Saviors, for example, or holding a play point up for like Holy Counterattack to remove like a Goblin. Like Sacred Plea and Saviors both have being options on turn 1. It felt really, really powerful because, like you said, we tuck away this Sacred Plea, and when we need to cash it in, we can cash it in later. If we just only need the 1 draw, we can crack it immediately. It's a pay 1 draw 1, and we technically like lose out on the 1 health, but we can cash this in later and like weave this into turns. There are a lot of turns too also in this deck where you basically get to a point where you only really need to float 2 play points some of the times, depending on what your board state is, like if you have Gravity Grappler out or in Karula and things like that. So having like that, and you have this weird point where like you can float 3 play points, but that doesn't really add anything unless you need to threaten Craving Splendor, which we play as a 2 of. So a lot of times this was easy to weave in some of our mid turns, like especially after Marwynn and stuff, and like right before Marwynn as well. That's what sold it on to me. Going into the event, I never actually tested Sacred Plea because we made that decision so late. I only played against Pressure with him playing it. When I played against him on Control Abyss and he was playing Sacred Plea, it felt really powerful, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm sold 100%. I put it in without playing it, until the day of the event. And let me tell you, Sacred Plea was like closing out games for me whenever I had to play the resource game. It felt really, really strong. There are times where I would weave this in and just put it on the board, and I got to a point, for example, in one of the final matches I had to play for the day, I think it was round 6, I played against Bellaboo, which is she's well known because she's got second place at Worlds. I had to play Sacred Plea out in certain situations and crack it for 1 to just set up certain things and find answers, because I couldn't ever crack it for 2, because obviously, if people don't know, she's like a force main basically. She was obviously on Pixies, so things were really aggressive. I had to find, yeah, and so like it's a bit of an aggressive matchup, and I had to play around a lot of stuff. That honestly, that entire match was like a clown fest. She can attest to that. If you saw us talking about our match in Discord, if you guys are in the Shadowverse Vault Discord, yeah, and then there was other matches too where like I put this down early, and later on I got to do like crazy payoffs of like Gravity Grappler, crack this for 2. What's it called? And then like man, what's our boy's name here? I'm forgetting his name.
Karula?
I don't know. Karula, yeah. Karula, go down to 0 play points, get 2 play points back, summon a token, deal 2 damage, you know. And so like that one turn like was so like backbreaking for my opponent. I got to draw 3 cards that turn. I had like a okay-ish board on there, and I had floating play points, and like a full hand meant that I could like answer most things they're going to try to run in with like Surefire Bullet or even Holy Counterattack, because we now have a ward because of Gravity Grappler, which is insane. Yeah, it turned out Sacred Plea was just actually a upgrade 100%. Like absolutely. Like I wouldn't blame people for playing Focus. I still think Focus is a relatively okay card. It's just after the hard testing and into the matchup we hated the most already, which was a Control Abyss, the Sacred Plea just did so much work, and then it happened to like just do just as much work in some other matches that are slower as well. Because like even playing like our main game plan honestly is like we need Marwynn on turn 4, especially against like decks like Kuon. We just need it, otherwise we lose the game. So like being able to turn 1 Sacred Plea, turn 2 crack it to draw 2 felt really good as well, which into those matchups, because a lot of times in the Kuon matchups, especially if they don't really understand what you're doing, they won't set up to punish you for your Marwynn turn sometimes, or they just don't have the cards to punish you. And even after that, on your turn or on their turn 3, and you're floating 3 play points, you can usually answer most things with like Surefire Bullet and like a Holy Counterattack will answer most things. Like, and you're good. You can go into your Marwynn turn and just, you know, Marwynn Evo with an empty board, which felt really good. And I think Sacred Plea helped that. I don't want to say help that a lot, but it worked so good with like everything the deck wants to do. It just slotted in very well.
Yeah, it's definitely something I guess I'm sort of surprised I didn't think about earlier. I think as we were just sort of like Focus, we weren't really touching Focus until towards the end. You know,
I think the biggest issue was we didn't grind out Control Abyss that hard, because we kind of made peace early on that matchup was bad. But
we just whatever, dog. It is what it is.
We sit down against Control Abyss, we'll just scoop it up on turn 2.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah, I'll go get some food. Yeah, that's literally what I said. Like, yeah.
But because I think in all the other matchups when we were playing Focus, it just felt like a good card because our hand was always full. We always were floating play points. We'd randomly have it occasionally, just be like, yeah, heal 1, draw a card. Oh, I found an answer, and and we never had the negative experience of Focus until the very end when we started hardcore testing Abyss.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
should we go back to like start?
From left to right, we'll start from the top here. This card here was always questioned. Like after we posted the list in the Discord and stuff, people were asking us a lot about, and like, why not Angelic Snipe? Where's Angelic Snipe? I mean, do you want to talk about the pressure?
Yeah, this is very much, you know, what would you do for Klondike Bar? What would you do for Blazing Breath? And we do a lot for Blazing Breath, to be honest. Like, I'm going to do a lot for Blazing Breath. Blazing Breath is one of the most broken cards in our game. And this is Blazing Breath with like 2 conditionals. We can't play it on our turn, and we have to have a ward. So we, you know, in our initial list, we were playing this and Snipe. Snipe really felt just like it's one of the worst top decks in the game. It's worse than top decking Goblin. And this, we were just like, let's just be greedy. Like our one sort of greed like thing is, let's just play Counterattack. We don't need Angelic Snipe. And the thinking behind that was sort of just like, we can just hold the mana up and wait to wait till their turn until they want to swing like their 1-drop at us or whatever, and it's not too big of a deal. I think one of my main issues was we do want to go first in almost every matchup, so it is like, we go first, we pass turn 1, they go turn 1, one drop, we can't respond to that, which is one of the biggest issues. But I think overall, it's just this card is broken if we have Marwynn out. It's broken. It's so silly. 1 mana deal 4 is absurd. It's really strong. And like I said, I would. There's a lot of stuff I would do. I would not be able to play this card on my turn and have to have a ward for Blazing Breath.
Yeah, one of the reasons too I really like this card. I mean, I think pressure just hit literally everything. I like the fact that we greeted this card a lot as well. You said as well as really good once Marwynn's on the board, it feels insane. Same thing with Gravity Grappler. One of the reasons I loved Gravity Grappler was because we were already really greedy with Holy Counterattack. Gravity Grappler helped us do that even more. And then the one thing about this card, was like my thought process. I told Pressure, I don't think this ever came up, and it probably didn't really matter too much. But I do think, I think this meta, a lot of people were just not really as aware of every card that Haven had access to. So it was more likely that someone would mess up and swing thinking that, like, I have one play point open, all I could do is Angelic Snipe. No, I have Holy Counterattack, I have my own Blazing Breath, and you've lost your dude that you needed to swing in. It never, I don't think it, I'd have to really think about it, but I think during the event, it never really came up in that scenario. But there were a lot of times where I played it to deal 4 damage, and the opponent had to, like, read the card twice because they just weren't 100% aware that this card exists, and why did we get to do 4 damage instead of 2?
Yeah.
But yeah, I personally, I really like that we greeted this card. And I think in our set review too, we literally said this was one of the big payoffs for, like, playing some type of Ward Haven thing or whatever. Yeah. And, we got to abuse that in this list, which I really liked.
Exactly. Yeah. It's one of those cards, like, a long time ago we talked about, was it set 3 when all the chess stuff came out?
Yeah.
The Blitz was like, I very quickly identified, like, I'd want to play the deck because of this card. That was the 1 mana deal 2+ whatever, like, pawns you have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is very similar, where it's like if this card didn't exist, I don't think this deck could exist. I think this is such a key part of the removal, like, suite or whatever, the removal package, and it's just 1 mana deal 4 is so strong. It's just
it very much is.
It hits everything up to turn 4 basically, in the meta, and really good card.
All right, saviors. I mean, obviously our game plan here is Marwynn. We need to find Marwynn. So this is our 4th, 5th, and 6th copy of Marwynn. When it's not our 4th, 5th, and 6th copy of Marwynn, this is our 1-drop removal to get our other opponents, like, 1-drops away and stuff like that. Occasionally we can banish, like, some higher cost followers, but it's usually after a Jeanne turn or something, we play 1 more play point and we can banish something big. But that's basically it. This is our other fake Angelic Snipe, essentially. But otherwise, it's more often than not, it's copies 4, 5, and 6 of Marwynn. One thing to note too, this is one of the only cards in the deck too that lets us shuffle our deck. So if you mulligan your hand away and you know something that you don't need now, but it's really important, like you see 2 Lucifers and you're going to need them later, you want to hopefully get a Saviors to shuffle your deck, so you can grab Marwynn, shuffle your deck, and you at least have a chance to draw into Lucifer or something like that. Because otherwise anything you mulligan in this deck from your hand is just gone forever. Because I think this is the only card that lets you really shuffle your deck.
That's a good point. I guess I just really, like, hadn't thought about that too much, because one of the positives I liked about this deck was it didn't feel like if we had to bottom a hand, it was, like, terrible. Like, because the top decks right now, Kuan and Force, there's some hands where it's like, this hand sucks, but I can't win if I bottom it, and so I never felt that with this deck, but it is true. Like, I guess in the crazy world where you have, like, 3 Marwynns in hand, you can probably go ahead and bottom it. It's going to be a rough game. But it feels less bad than, like, I have 3 Kuans in hand.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not the purpose of the card, but it's just a byproduct of it being in the deck, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. This is definitely just the 1 mana search Marwynn, or the second ability is whoops, we lost the dice roll and goblins feeling hungry. We gotta
Get this aggro crap out of here, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, also it targets 2 defense or less, and it happens to be Shikigamis are also 2 defense or less. So if you need to slow down Kuon, though that's not the best game plan in the world, at least for this deck, but it's still an option.
Yeah, definitely.
Obviously, 3 of Sacred Plea, we kind of talked about that already, so we're just going to go ahead and get past that. Boost Kicker. I guess, do you want to talk?
Your favorite card.
Okay, yeah, screw you. I'm going to talk about I love Boost Kicker. This card is so sick. I want to play this card every time. I can't wait for the PR version to come out so I can have 3 foil Boost Kickers in my deck. Okay, this is our worst John, though. This card is so flexible, which is really nice. So if we're playing against an aggro matchup, a lot of times on turn 4, we can Boost Kicker for 2 and just kind of clear the board, then recover a play point and like hold up a holy counterattack if needed, if they do some wacky stuff, which is nice because a lot of this aggro stuff will come down and it either hurts itself or whatever, and they have 2 health most of the time. So 1 Boost Kicker plus like a holy counterattack when they swing in with the extra guy that lives is more than enough to really clear any aggro boards. A lot of time into aggro boards, this comes down. You get a 2 for 1 something usually, or even more if they're greedy, depending on what happened. There have been a lot of game states too where I'm like, Boost Kicker for like 5, clear 4 things off your board, and the opponent's like, oh crap, and they kind of like lost there because they just weren't expecting to be able to clear like all these like 5 health followers and stuff like that. And into the late game, it comes up occasionally, but like if you ever get to the 10 play point area, any Boost Kicker in hand literally tells your opponent that if they don't have a follower with more than 8 health, it'll just get cleared by Boost Kicker. You obviously have to pay 10 for it, but at that point, you don't care because you usually have to get rid of things. I played into my locals with this card, and they play a lot of different dragon lists. For example, one of them was playing Fafnir still. Fafnir came out and he like dropped like 2 Fafnirs. I was like, what the heck just happened? And then Boost Kicker off the top won me the game. Like just by itself. The card's insane. But outside of that, like I said though in the beginning, it's our worst Jeanne. Like Jeanne d'Arc and Boost Kicker are like some of our 2 better follow-ups, honestly. Like obviously Jeanne being the best follow-up to Marwynn, Boost Kicker being a second best follow-up when our opponent has a really wide board, like after they go crazy with trying to punish us for our skipped Marwynn turn. These are the 2 cards that come up and kind of, deal with all their stragglers and stuff. And then we are now feel super in control because now we have this 8/8 Marwynn that just swung in. It has Ward Aura and this Boost Kicker here that refunds us a play point, which means also that at worst we have 1 play point left up with Holy Counterattack. Means it's going to be even harder for them to get through our Marwynn Ward with Aura. I really like this card. I mean, I made that very apparent in our set review as well. So obviously, I'm gonna really hype this card up. You have anything else to add?
Yeah, I like this card. I think one thing is, and early on, I was doing this a lot, or I think one key thing is like don't overplay this card in terms of you can get real deep in the weeds of like, okay, if I play this guy on 2 and then I play Karula on 3 and then it's like, nah, just use him for the AoE. Like I was doing that a lot early where it was like, okay, my hand is like, we can do some crazy shit if it lives, but I think you sacrifice a lot of the late game stuff. Like this is basically a late game card. It can come down against aggro early on. And definitely after Marwynn, it's like one of the weaker, like options after Marwynn, but sometimes it's necessary. But definitely just be aware of like the way this deck functions. Like 1 out of 10 games, it'll function like, okay, I'm just gonna like flood the board and play my 2, 3, 4, and then Marwynn like is not even a card that matters in this matchup. But you definitely want to consider this card like a turn 5, turn 6, turn 7 play. But yeah, I like him. I don't think he's like amazing. I think he's really understated. But cool card. Yeah, good for this deck for sure. Good for this deck.
No, absolutely. I'm done singing its praises. Boost Kicker's the best.
If he was a 1-mana 1/1, he'd be
Oh
fine.
my god, if he was a 1-mana 1/1, he would be broken, man. Let's.
Because that's the issue I have is that like his stats are so awkward where it's like against most boards he's 2 turns too late. But like he also just has no relevance in the early game. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
It's really deceptive. The fact that it costs 2 is really deceptive. Like it
Yeah.
in reality is this card is never a 2-drop. Like maybe there are some games like Pressure said you just curve it out and you'll kind of understand like really quickly what matches you can do that in. But this card is usually a turn 6 or later play. And usually it's like you want to, if you can handle the board without playing Boost Kicker, sometimes you just want to avoid using this card because it's a very important resource, because it's one of the few ways we can deal with a wide board that's kind of tall, that gets out of the Jeanne d'Arc range. So if there's a lot of things that are 5 or higher health that we need to get rid of, this is the card we need.
Yeah.
All right, Phantom Blade Wielder.
This card is this is probably my favorite card in the deck. This card is insane. The 2-mana 2/2 Evo for 1, so the fighter or like the 2-drop Evo, sort of thing, and then on evolve it deals 2 damage. And then if you pass, end of your turn, if you float 2, you deal 2 damage to another thing. This thing is so sick in the early game. It's so strong in the early game. It stops aggro completely against Kuan. It kills the paper Shigami and also forces cards out of their hand for removal. So like they can't just go, okay, I'm just Demon Collar or Demon Collar Evo here or whatever. I really like that about her. I really like that she develops the board in a pretty meaningful way, because 3/3 is a surefire or something, but it's not a snipe. She dodges a snipe. And removes something for you, stops the aggro, and sort of, presents this chip damage in, which, if you know the matchup, you'll know that the chip damage is really dangerous because the game plan is just 8/8/4, right? We swing Marwynn twice, and then we find 4 somewhere. So if we just chip in 1 with her, that makes our math at the end of the game way easier. That means we just have to find Karula. We just have to find. I guess Lucy does 4 anyway, but if they heal, it doesn't matter. We just have to find the Lucy or whatever. I really like her a lot. I think, she's just an important piece in the. I missed the 86% chance to get Marwynn. I got to do a board-based game plan.
Yeah, like just to add on what Precious said here, like it's so weird because in certain matchups, and we recognize this very quickly, like Precious said, is these 2 extra damage every turn really adds up if we choose not to swing in with this card. In certain matchups, for example, Sword is one of those matchups where you want to see this card because Sword doesn't have a very great way to really deal with this card. I know some lists are playing, I forget the name of the 2-drop, but it evos into Have a Cell or whatever. But kind of outside of that, Sword isn't really playing any really like removal spells or snipes or anything like that right now, which means
heroic entry into Mach Knight.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that as well. But they still need two.
They need one other hero card. But if they're hitting that, you lose the game anyway.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. But this sitting on board and just choosing not to swinging with it till you're ready to can really take over the game. Like, don't underestimate the effect the start of your end phase if you have 2 play points, select an enemy fall and deal 2 damage. Because if you undervalue that, you will not find you'll think this card is bad, but then I don't think you'll think the card's bad, but I mean, you won't be getting the maximum value and like understand how powerful this card can actually be into the aggro matchups, into the board-based matchups that don't have ways to easily deal with this. It's very impressive how much this will cause issue for your opponent if you never swing in with it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Blackened Scripture. We kind of talked about this in the prior deck, so there's not much really to add. It's just it took the place of Snipe. It banished things, which was nice. Was there anything else we're missing really with Blackened Scripture?
No, not really.
Yeah,
Banish. We just sort of identified that Banish is pretty good in like 2 of the matchups that we thought were going to be most common. Kuan, and for me, I thought Control Abyss would be like one of the more played decks. And so we were just like, let's just add banishes. Snipe just doesn't do much outside of the first 2 turns of the game. And
I think extra banishes too into like other people who are playing like Bellringers and stuff. This is obviously really good.
Yeah.
Like they go down a card when they were expecting to go up a card.
Dragon. Dragon decks that are playing. Actually, it's just good against Dragon in general. I guess we can talk about some of the matchups later, but like banishing their servants and disciples is
really big. Yeah. All right. I mean, there's not much to really say about Surefire Bullet. It's just a really good control tool. we float 2 all the time, so like it's usually active every turn.
Yeah, it's like arguably the most impactful card in the game. I think it's like it shapes like so much of how the game functions. But yeah, we just put it. Any deck that is not aggro is probably plays 3 Surefires. It doesn't have access to like an even stronger removal tool.
Yeah, this card is really nice too because like I said, our game plan is we want to go first, which means a lot of times our opponent's on 3 is going to play a 3-drop and evo it, and a lot of evos on that turn are 4/4s. So this is a nice, easy answer to that problem for us because we, like I said, Marwynn on 4 is our game plan, and we hope that our opponent has nothing on board so they can't punish us as hard when we do our skip turn thing. So Surefire Bullet is just a good answer to our opponent playing one thing and evoing it, essentially.
Yeah.
All right, Presha, hype up this guy because this guy is insane.
The Grappler, Zangief, whatever we want to call him. Grappler, 3-mana, 3/3. We were just like, okay, get the hell out of here. We don't need her, but we need some way to draw. We need some card draw. This was before the Sacred Plea, right? And I was sort of like, man, this guy, he seems so good on paper. And also in my mind, I was like, this guy was so broken in digital. He was like busted in digital. So I was like, okay, let me try him. And I mean, he's absurd. This card's absurd. This card is like so strong. Basically, you have to think of him as 5 mana. But when you think of him almost like a Karula card, where it's 5 mana, 3/3, summon a mystic artifact, and then gain 2 play points back. I think that's sort of like the best way to think of him. And when you think of him in that light, is insane because he's basically 5 mana, 5/6 worth of stats, draws you a card. Half of those stats are in a ward, which turns on counterattack. And we get 2 mana back basically. And if he somehow lives, watch out. The snowball is going to start happening. He's a very snowbally card. And he's sort of similar to Deus Ex Machina in like the win more aspect where like if this guy sticks around for even an extra turn, the game is so favored for you. But what I liked about him more was that he didn't feel terrible playing him on 5 because he impacts the board in that he creates 2 bodies. Both of them, if the opponent is aware of the matchup, are scary because one of them's a ward and one of them is the guy who makes the wards. And then you're able to have the 2 mana up, which goes into our game plan, and they just have to make these kind of awkward plays to try to remove both. Or we just rip 2 cards of our hand, so we just basically go hand neutral, and they have to spend 2 cards to kill our guy. And that's if we don't have removal in hand. So, yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, like, he appreciated everything. Like, my experience playing this guy, the reason... Okay, so... part of like the reason why I ended up on this deck was actually because of Gravity Grappler, unironically, is because in our testing before we put Gravity Grappler in, we were dealing with 2 of the matchups we were dealing with back and forth was Abyss and Dragon, Disdain Dragon. I mean, I think we know now, like, Disdain Dragon won the event, right? Or is it Forest still? Yeah. So, yeah, Disdain Dragon in my mind was going to be one of the either like the 3rd most popular deck there, or worst case scenario, the 4th most popular deck, because I think that deck is like the best middle ground of like, I can beat Pixies and I have an okay matchup into Kuon, and I don't want to play the mirror matches in either of those. So Disdain felt like, and then I also think like a lot of people just like Dragoncraft in general. It was honestly one of the decks I was highly considering because I was going back and forth between Pixie and Disdain a lot because I liked both I don't want to say I like, but I enjoyed at least Disdain's playstyle, and Pixies was just boring as hell. Um, but the one thing I was not like liking so much when we were playing into the Disdain matchup, like we felt like it was probably relatively even. But the thing I hated was just like my opponent gets to just like, if we don't ward Marwynn sometimes, like my opponent just gets to Forte Evo my face a bunch and I just lose the game. And Gravity Grappler kind of solved all those issues for me. It's like we missed the Marwynn turn. We're playing for resources instead or whatever in the matchup. And Gravity Grappler on 5 is like, there's a ward now, which means you can't just, on your turn 5 with 5 play points and an Evo point, you can't just Forte Evo and hit me for 7. You have to deal with the board now. And on top of that, what Brescia said, if Gravity Grappler lives more than one turn, you're going to start running away with the game. It's obnoxious. So some of the games I played in Swiss, Gravity Grappler hit the board. They couldn't deal with it. I chose not to swing in with it, so it could build another thing and another thing. And like after like the third token, it was just over. Like they just kind of scooped it up from there. They just knew they were not going to win the game.
I wish that would have happened.
Yeah, even if they answered the Gravity Grappler at that point, the fact they got 2 to 3 draws was just like backbreaking. On top of them having to use resources to get rid of the wards, Gravity Grappler is an insane card. If you can make it work like we did, you are going to love this card. And then I'm not sure if I said it, but this is one of the only ways we can kind of build a semi-wide board as well. A lot of the times, that's like one of our weaknesses for what our board state looks like. We have a lot of really good, powerful followers, but we just don't, if the matchup requires us to go semi-wide and have like 3 or more bodies on the board to like be able to win, Gravity Grappler is one of our only ways to kind of facilitate that.
Yeah, I think talking about the state a little bit more is I think we identified pretty quick that, like, for Disdain, the deck does not function without Gamu. And it doesn't have a lot of card draw that like actually like
Pluses
adds
you.
cards to your hand. Yeah. And so it's very much like an attrition matchup in because they have so much burn and they just have so much like explosiveness that you just have to, build the wall, stay the course until they just have one card in their hand, and they basically cannot function if they only have one card in the hand unless it's Gamu, and so Gravity Grappler just does everything for that matchup. This is just the most important card in that matchup.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
All right, Karula Arts Master. This I don't. Do you want to talk about him or?
Yeah, sure. I'll talk about him a little bit. He escaped Portal Craft, and this card's so bizarre. Like I definitely thought once or twice, like, is this even good in this deck?
Yeah. There like, definitely were times where we're both kind of like, I don't know, maybe Karula shouldn't be in this list.
Yeah. Because I think the most immediate swap is the Apostle of Repose, and I do think. I think there's definitely some merit to swapping. I almost feel like after we added Lucifer, I think we should have tried Apostle some more instead of Karula. Just because the most important thing with Karula for this deck is the burn damage. The draw is nice and the kill is nice. But the kill only happens like when the kill is happening. It's like, turn 10 Karula Evo pass and I have 8 mana open, and it's like not the strongest play because he just gets killed by Surefire. And I think for us though, we were just like, we just need to find, we're swinging twice with Marwynn, and then we need to find the 4 damage somewhere. And of course, he adds 2 damage to that, and then we need to find another 2 with him, or if he lives, or whatever, But he does work really well in combination with some of these other cards, like with the Gravity Grappler. I think the Gravity Grappler being in the deck makes Karula better, and a lot of these other cards, like the Phantom Blade Wielder, sometimes. I don't know. I think like after the weekend was done, after we, I think this is one of the cards I think we maybe should have spent more time really thinking about, like, is this the card we want to play, or should we play Apostle, or should we try some other Evo, even maybe like an Erd Evo or something, but I don't know. He's fine, but towards the end, it was like every time I played him, it was like, okay, this is just he's like worse rule 9 where I'm not ripping a card. He just sits there and he dies a surefire next turn. I have 2 open, but it's like it doesn't matter, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know what you think.
I kind of have the same sentiment. I think we definitely kind of like locked ourselves into Karula very early on and never really thought till like the very end of like maybe he doesn't belong in this deck. And I could see it going either way, Karula staying in the deck or the Karula leaving the deck. One thing which was nice about this card is that you can sometimes, depending on the matchup, like we said, you can abuse that. They probably won't remove it if you don't swing, which means you're going to get another 2 damage in. The other thing I liked about this card too is like almost all of our things just need to float 2 play points, which means if we have the extra play points, like on turn 6, for example, going second, you can Gravity Grappler, Karula Evo with Evo point, get 2 play points back, and now you have 3 bodies on the board and you drew a card and deal 2 damage to your opponent. Like that came up one time, which I liked. And those scenarios come up and it feels good when it happens. Yeah, it feels good when those like turns kind of happen sometimes and you're like, oh, this happened to work out this way. But it was Karula was not necessarily like a huge main game plan. It was probably our weakest follow-up to Marwynn, and a lot of the times it as a follow-up to Marwynn was just like we wanted the draw, we wanted the refunded play points, and that was it. And now we're like at 4 floating play points. We got a draw off of it. We dealt 2 damage. Like Precious said, we're a little bit closer to closing out the game. Now they have to deal with Marwynn and Karula. Because Karula, honestly, like if you let it live, it is kind of a problem child. Like if it's on the board, it could help you go out of control. But I think if it does live, you're probably winning the game anyway. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But it just happened that like its effects all kind of synergized just enough to like feel okay in the deck, and that's probably part of the reason why it took us so long to realize near the end like maybe Karula wasn't the perfect option for our turn, like or for the curve thing. But up until that point, it was just working with everything very neatly, essentially as like a supplementary thing.
Exactly. Did you see they had the ultra rare you were looking for at one of the vendors?
Yeah, but they wouldn't give it to me. They wouldn't give it to me for cheaper, and I was like, I'm not going to buy 2.
What were they selling it for?
Well, they had one in there for like $50, but then they had 2 more there that were like 28 or whatever, and I was like, can I get both? I want to buy both. I would be like, I'd buy both of them for like $50 right now, so I guess put them in my deck. And they were like, nah, and I was like, okay, I'm good.
No one's gonna buy that. You were the only person that was gonna buy
that. I know, that's why I was like, and I think like after this, Karula as a card is probably gonna slowly disappear.
Card will never be played ever again. This is gonna be the second like lowest ultra next to Anne.
Yeah. All right. Next, Craving Splendor. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. We just want quick spells, so we added more quick spells that did things. It kind of answers fairy dragons as well if we really need to. Honestly, this is probably another card where if we want to reevaluate the list, depending on what we're playing into, at least, when I was playing yesterday, I basically never saw this card, and like it came up like maybe once or twice in a matchup, and like it was never a card I was relatively thinking about. Like I need to top deck this card. I want this card at any point. So honestly, this card could probably be changed into something else, but it just felt good in testing, and it was never bad, but it was never amazing. So I'm sure someone else out there might find a reason to cut it and put something else. I mean, I think you had the same sentiment as well.
Yeah, I probably talked to Kid about cutting this 6 times. Not even exaggerating. Like it's just okay. We're gonna cut this for another 7 drive. We're gonna cut this for another PTP. It's just the most like. We just need extra removal. We just need extra quick stuff, and there just literally doesn't, there's not other extra quick stuff that exists outside of Angelic Snipe, but we are like going away from that. We need higher value stuff. So the one heal is nice.
Yeah, and one of the weird things too about this deck is occasionally you do just end up you just float 3 sometimes because that's like all you could really do, and it's nice when I have a Craving Splendor in hand. At least it's active now. So. It comes up, but like I think kind of like we said earlier too, a lot of the times when you do float play points, especially in the mid to early game, it's only going to be 2 at most. So, this is not usually active as a quick play, and a lot of times you actually do end up playing it on your turn instead of as a quick play, but it comes up sometimes. So,
yeah.
All right. Jeanne, I mean, we kind of hinted on this already. And I think if you've been playing Havencraft for so long, you kind of know how powerful Jeanne is. It's obviously play 3/2 line. It's the best follow up to Marwyn. Like if there's one thing I could like, guarantee every game I play with this deck is that I will always turn forward, draw Marwyn, and then I will always draw Jeanne off of my Marwyn Evo, draw a card,
Yeah.
and then like anytime Jeanne comes out as the follow up for after Marwyn, I feel like you are guaranteed the win at that point. I feel like it's just too much. So, like most decks will not have a board after a Jeanne Evo. If they still have something too that's like tapped, Jeanne can swing into it if you're really threatened by it. Because obviously Jeanne Evo has rush. Otherwise, like you swing with Marwyn, it's an 8-10. It's just infinitely harder for them to deal with. And not only that, if they deal with the Marwyn somehow, like Jeanne's usually on the board still for whatever reason, unless you're getting Themist or something. So it'll get in there for like that extra 4 occasionally. And once again, the maths out. Basically, 2 8s plus a 4 is 20. So we're good to go. Was there anything else you can think about this card?
Yeah, I think this is this is one of the like Haven staples from set 1. She just does everything the deck wants to do, but one thing I didn't realize until like night, the last night we practiced, and definitely the day of, if you don't see this against Kuan, the game might not be winnable.
Oh yeah, it's much rougher.
I didn't see this either of the games that I played against Kuan, and they were pretty close to unwinnable because it's the added like 5 health that takes either Witch Bolt or 2 cards from their hand to deal with, and then now your Marwyn is 10 health, which makes the math way harder for them to deal with because they have to swing. They have to get it down to 6 and then storm or a meteor storm. And if it's just an 8/8 guy, the Marwyn is just an 8/8 guy. It's so much easier to kill the Marwyn from the Kuan side. I don't think we really realized how like because when we were practicing, like because this was one of the first matchups we played when I was playing the deck, and Kit was like watching me play the deck basically, or just like seeing how it played out. I saw Jeanne like almost every game I played against him when he was on Kuan, and I guess I never like put the 2 and 2 together. It's like the reason I'm winning is because I'm seeing the Jeanne, and that's sort of what my sort of conclusion was that at the end of this is that like she's also kind of the second most important card in some matchups, specifically Kuan, because if you just see the Marwyn, you still lose. Because the deck is just absurd. Because Kuan's just an absurd deck.
Yeah, Kuan's in a very absurd deck, and like the Jeanne kind of like Pressure touched on is the Meteor Storm is like the issue that we have to deal with a lot of the times, and Jeanne makes it so the Meteor Storm is not the best thing they can do. They Meteor Storm, it doesn't really remove Marwyn. They have to run more things into it. That's like really good for us because they're spending resources that they don't necessarily want to be spending. And yeah, it was very late on when like the realization too, like I kind of hit that same realization around the same time. Maybe we even talked about it, I forget, but
Yeah.
Jeanne is just so important, like to the point where like sometimes I look at a hand and I'm like, there's a Jeanne in it, but there's no Marwyn. It almost makes me want to keep the Jeanne in hopes to draw one of the 6 Marwyns instead. I don't want to say like the Kuan match is unwinnable, but it's so much harder without Jeanne. Like without the Marwyn into Jeanne, the games can be rough, especially if your opponent knows what they're doing. Because I think near the end of our testing, we are both so familiar with the deck and the strategies and what we need to do to like combat it that I think we're kind of gaming ourselves a little bit and thinking the deck was way worse than we thought it was because we were preemptively playing into things we knew that the deck wanted to be doing. Whereas I think part of the strength of this deck, and maybe this deck won't be that powerful now it's out there, is that people sitting down against us in a huge Swiss tournament won't really have a strong idea of what we're doing until it's kind of too late. And then they can't really play their game plan, or they might have made a mistake and dished like the Meteor Storm or something early on. And now they're like, crap, I don't have access to this thing that in this scenario would be amazing. Which happened like once or twice against some of my opponents, like in the first couple rounds. They misplayed because they just probably had no Haven matchup experience into like this type of deck and thinking we were on Egg Haven, and they're like, oh, and they messed up, and it was kind of over from there.
Yeah, I think that one of the last times we practiced, I played Kuan against Kit because Kit needed, just practice playing the deck because for a while it was just he was playing the deck into me, and then and then he builds and stuff. And I might be misremembering, so but I think I won every game that you didn't see John.
Pretty much.
And that really started to scare me. It was too late though, and I did start coping on fairies. If anyone saw some of my games, I was mashing fairies, because I was like, ooh, backup plan, But yeah, I think that it's just a really important card, and we were sort of banking on like people not knowing the matchup and stuff. But I think in reality, I think like it's not too hard to figure out. Like, okay, I just need to heal a couple times. Like
Yeah, exactly.
Out. And also like sometimes the healing just comes off stuff you'd want to do anyway, like the traditional sorcerers and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. We can talk about that more when we get into
when we talk about all the matchups and everything. All right, this is our big boy Marwynn. I mean, it's pretty obvious why we kept him or built this deck. It's literally him. We actually went to the 3/3 line because I think really early on we recognized that we just need all 3 evos. Like, if one gets answered, we want to be able to follow up with another one. If that one gets answered, the third one is usually what closes the game out if we have to go that far and go the distance, right?
Yeah.
And then in the resource intensive matchups, Marwynn into Marwynn is just like your opponent just feels like it's unwinnable at that point because spells don't target it, obviously, because of Aura Ward makes them to run things in. We get a heal, we get a draw a card, and on turn 6 turn 7, with an Evo point, we get to accelerate a turn as well, which is nice. We get to 10 before they do, but it doesn't really matter. But it's nice that we get that extra bonus essentially. Card's insane in that sense. Probably after this, the card will not be insane anymore. I haven't really looked past this meta, but I just assume like as the metas go on, Marwynn is just going to be a weaker and weaker card essentially.
He becomes back. He kind of goes back to this. This was his limelight. I think we sort of pointed out, hey, he might be able to carry the pitching staff, but not anymore. If you're ever going to do control Haven, you're just going to do Aegis. He's the backup. But for us, he was the boss monster. And yeah, really the card we sort of identified could be good in this meta. And I think we were right.
Yeah, I think we were 100% right. Definitely. I think, like you said, this was definitely the moment for Marwynn to shine the most. And now this falling star will, be destroyed in our atmosphere at this point. The meta of the atmosphere.
He was not able to win a World Series before he had to retire.
Yeah.
Little sad for him. It was our only chance.
Yeah. I think I want to say one thing too is because like we realized this about a month before that like Marwynn was like pretty good into certain matchups. I think it was like about a week or so out from the event. Shito on the Discord was like, everyone's sleeping on Marwynn, and both of us started sweating.
Yeah, there was definitely some. Yeah, we were. And it's funny because there was a lot more Marwynn than like I expected it all at the tournament.
Oh yeah, I saw more people playing Control Haven than I thought that would be possible. I thought almost everyone who showed up. Yeah, I thought everyone on Haven would just be playing Egg because it's clearly the stronger deck in general going into everything. And so the assumption was there'll be like one other guy playing Control, and we just dodge that guy, and we dodge us playing each other essentially, and we'll be pretty happy for the rest of the day. When I walked around after round 1, I was like, oh dang, there's actually a lot of random people playing like essentially just straight up Control Haven, and I was like, oh, this is kind of scary. Luckily, they all kind of like ate crap. I'm sorry guys who were on Control Haven, but almost all of them like ate crap and just lost, didn't make top 32. I think I saw one Control Haven list in the top 32 that was like actual.
All the rest egg then? Wasn't there 7 Havens in top 32?
When I walked around, I only saw one Control. I know for a fact one egg Haven made it because that was my last round, and they beat me because they saw 3 eggs and 3 explosions like by turn 6, and I was like, oh, I lost this game.
Right? Yeah.
and
crazy. That's
it was
crazy. That's
yeah,
crazy.
it was really hard. I mean, he recognized that he like this was the most craziest high roll he's ever had in his life. Like that's like that we were talking about it at the end of the game and laughing about it. But there was probably maybe like a couple more or whatever, but I think the standard, when I looked around, a lot of people were still kind of playing the Deus Ex Machina stuff, and I think that was just a worse list to be playing into this meta. You know, they did well, but I was not very, the standard like JP list that was going around where they were playing like 2 Marwyns and whatever. It just never really spoke to me, and it just looked like a bad list in general. I'm sure, like obviously those people had success if there was more than like one other Control Haven list, I guess, in top 32. But it was interesting. One thing that I thought we were the most innovative on was Lucifer, that we'll talk about later. That other person was also on Lucifer, so clearly they figured out the same thing we did at that point.
Yeah, Ober from the Discord, he posted his list.
Yeah,
and it was very similar. I played him at the Wind God tournament back in the good old days. That was the Wind God. I remember. You remember the wind? You know, the wind tunnel. Yeah.
That was like the second time I ever met you in person, basically. Yeah. Dude, that tournament was that was a tournament of the ages.
only true gamers remember the Wind God tournament.
All right, we'll move on here. Acolyte's Light. I mean, I think this is pretty obvious. It says banish and we heal 2. That's pretty good.
Yeah, pretty strong. Yeah, it's really strong.
Yeah, I mean, nothing else to really add. I think the biggest thing here, because when I was on stream, even the people watching the matchup, they're like, everyone was like, Lucifer, Lucifer, Lucifer. And I was like, yeah, Lucifer is actually really sick. I forgot exactly how we came up to this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel it was like one of those nights where we were both still coping really hard. And we were both like, okay, let's just look at every Haven and neutral card there is. And we slowly went through every card on the list to figure this out.
I think I was extremely high on, and I still am pretty high on TM Opera O. And then you were talking about Israfil, and I think we sort of came to like a middle ground of like, okay, 7-drop, because my downside of Israfil was it comes out too late. And then Lucifer like comes down a turn early, and it also has the burn damage that we sometimes need because we just need to find the 4. We also, which we should have talked about, Kit brought up pretty early on the Lyrial, and we played that a lot. I really liked the Lyrial in the list, but I think that was when we were super locked into just like all in burn. And we sort of realized that wasn't going to work into just the whole matchup spread of just all the meta stuff. So I think we sort of had like the Lyrial in the back of our mind.
Yeah, because I think when we did try the Lyrial, and I was like, let's try Lyrial, because at the time, one of the biggest issues was closing out games. And the thought process for me was like, Lyrial is like okay into some matchups, like for example, Disdain Dragon and Egg are like the 2 major ones where we're going to get burned by something, but if Lyrial's on the board, we won't. But also Lyrial acts as like a lightning rod for like removal, on top of like if they don't remove it, we like over the course of a couple turns we can win the game, because like I said, we realized pretty quickly on when we were playing, and if the other player was familiar enough with the matchup, they can kind of stabilize. We could never get like the extra 6 damage in or something like that to just close out the game. And Lyrial was the first thought process in trying to correct that.
Yeah. I still think about it like if I were to redo the deck, I think I'd want to put Lyrial back in as like early game burn, like early game just finding some damage, and then I'd probably want to cut Karula for the Apostle of Repose, I think would be the changes I'd want to say. Because when you brought up Lyrial, I was like, okay, I was like, eh. And then I tried, I was like, whoa, this is awesome. Because there was a lot of hands where it was like, wow, I have like eight burn damage like in my hand, and it's like I'm not like, oh, I have to hit the Marwynn twice or I lose, or even like, oh, if you heal from 10 to 12, I lose the game, which felt like how it works sometimes,
Yeah, it really did, honestly. Yeah. I really liked how we ended up on Lucifer. I think it was like if Lucifer was ever going to come back, it was now in like this type of list.
Or fallen angel.
I think when we're arguing about like what do we put in, because we had 2 slots, so we were kind of like sold on like 36 to 38 cards of the deck already, and we're like tinkering around with like 4 slots essentially, and to figure out what we need in each matchup. I think landing on Lucifer was like the best outcome of everything of what we're talking about, because I was like thinking more of Israfil, because Israfil not only does it answer the board state, but it also like heals us 4, and then if it lives, it swings in for 10, which is an insane amount. That's more than enough to close out a game, especially with like our Marwynn strategy. And but Pressure obviously quickly identified before we even tested. It was like, Israfil is just so slow, especially if we don't have the Evo points. It's just not, it's almost not worth it. It's like a turn 9 play, and a lot of times we can't, like, if we're going to that point in the game, we've probably lost. Like if we start hitting 10 play points, unless it's the resource game, we lost the game. Like the other decks that are playing real control are gonna out control us. We're in this weird mid-range tempo stuff happening where we have to find the sweet spot to like sneak in and like get our win that way. Lucifer, amazing middle ground to that. Like you said, add the extra 4 damage when you need it. If it lives, that's 12 damage on the next turn as well, which is basically kind of like having Israfil, essentially. And the healing and it having ward is also relevant. Once again, it doesn't come up too often, because usually by the time you're playing Lucifer, you're winning the game, or you're losing the game so bad that this is the one way you're going to try to stabilize. But it having ward is relevant because of Holy Counterattack as well. Obviously, when you do Evo, it doesn't have ward anymore, so you got to keep that in mind. But yeah, it just felt like the perfect pocket, like, pick of the deck that worked with everything.
Yeah, I think with the Israfil stuff, I think you just got so much dopamine from my comments and reactions when you discarded it when you were playing like when you were playing Abyss.
Yeah,
and like the reactionary, the reaction commentary that I had. Whenever I just saw that fucking card, you're like, oh, let's put it this day. But no, I think everything you said is right. And
I think if Israfil was cheaper, and like even did less or whatever, because it kind of did exactly what we want Lucifer to do as well. It just different later and all that stuff. It just, the timing for the card didn't work out, and Lucifer just happened to be perfect, because like one of the biggest things we talked about too is our turn 7 plays were never strong, and Lucifer kind of corrected that issue.
Yeah, that is important. His turn 7 is like a really important turn, because it's like the turn after our turn 7 is the turn where we confirm the win, because either our game plan went without a hitch and we did 8, 8, and 4. And 7 is our 4, or we need to pivot and either close the game out and find some more burn or whatever, or we're like, okay, turn 7 is the turn we're assessing, like, how do we even win the game at this point, if we're so far behind. And yeah, like without Lucy, it's like Karula Evo. Yeah,
exactly.
Hope we have the Grappler.
Yeah. I want to add too, actually, the base side of Lucifer is actually really good into the definitely the attrition matchups, like into Pixies. Like the reason I was able to even beat the Pixie matchup against Bella Boo on round 6 or whatever was Lucifer coming down, warding and healing me 4, caused me to stabilize too much that she spent all her resources essentially to remove Lucifer, and into me going like, it's over, here you go, and then GG. Like Lucifer was just perfect. I think this was perfect timing for Lucifer to come back, and I'm gonna be sad to see him go again. Like,
what do you mean the fallen angels stuff, bro?
All right, get the hell out of here. Oh man. So yeah, this is the list. Pressure and I literally sweat, blood, tears, anger, rage, everything. Like every emotion was thrown at this list.
Yeah.
If you're looking for something different to try until the rotation in like a couple weeks or whatever, like how far are we? Like 3-4 weeks
Don't
away
do
now.
that. Don't
Yeah.
tell people to play the deck and then you're gonna go to the regional and you're gonna play Kuwa.
Don't tell them, guys.
There's gonna be, like,
But I
20
mean, like,
people on the list, and it's
Yeah.
like terrible.
As much as I enjoyed this list and piloting it and building it with pressure, at the end of the day, honestly, this deck sucks.
Yeah.
I don't want to, like, I'm not, as much as we're like kind of hyping things up and like, you know, a top 32 and stuff like that. I do believe there is like an alternate world where, like, if I didn't get high rolled against Sword, the path I had was like a really high chance of me hitting grand finals, because every matchup I felt going into it was very I felt favored for us, especially if they didn't understand the matchup very well. So it was unfortunate that like my run ended in top 32 that day into a matchup I thought was super favored. We thought it was so favored that we stopped testing it very quickly. And it turns out if your opponent sees like triple Corley Dance, it's no longer favored.
Yeah, because I played one game into it and like the night before or whatever, and he beat my ass. Cromwell beat my ass because he had heroic entry on turn 3 or whatever. But it was just like, okay, here's 5 bodies, clear. Okay, here's 5 bodies, clear. Okay, here's 5 bodies. Rest in peace, because I don't have a third clear. You know?
Yeah, exactly. That's basically what happened. I was just
and when we tested, it was very much like, okay, the only thing we need to worry about is Leo. And like Leo does like cash out, or we're done if Leo comes down. But I do think we should have practiced that a little bit more. I do also just think like I there's a lot of matchups where it's like I think we should practice more, but I think if we practice more, I think we would have not played this.
Possibly, yeah. It really depends.
I was telling Kit the whole time, like, this is the Umineko deck, because once the magic is gone, it's like it's not real. Real,
like a little side tangent too, dude. When we were talking about this deck and he made the Umineko reference, I was like legit pogging, because I was like, I played the VNs and watched the anime, so I was like, I didn't know Pressure like did any of that, and I was like, dude, Umineko's so sick. But don't sidetrack too much.
But yeah, it's a cool deck. This is just one thing I told Kit when we were testing and stuff is this deck has no auto win hand, and all of the good decks in the format do, and I think that's such a weakness for this deck. And it's like, I think that's just this game right now. Is it's all best of 1, and it's really high rolly. That I just went in like I don't want to play a high roll deck. But it's unfortunate that you can't make like a consistent deck like this. That you still can't beat the like auto win hands that some decks have.
Yeah, this is definitely like, if I had to like pinpoint this deck, it's the best fair deck in the format type of scenarios.
It's like too fair. It's like if this meta should be this deck and Hunter are the 2 best decks. If this deck and Hunter were the 2 best decks, this might be the best format ever.
Yeah,
but alas, we have War Criminal Kuon and Crackhead Forest. And it's like,
War Criminal Kuon. He was terrorizing digital, and now he's back on paper, baby.
But we threw you in this fucking dimension, dude. Please do not come back.
Yeah, you remember World War I when Kuon was running around? Welcome back to World War II, baby.
Welcome back.
God, yeah. Okay, so we're gonna close this up with I guess like the last like 5 days leading up to the event, one thing we did, like I mentioned we should do this, and we did do this, was we're going to write notes into a private, Discord channel, every matchup, what we want, and like, how do we get our win, so that if we sit down against that matchup, we can quickly review what our strategy is, make sure we don't forget about certain things. But also, when we wrote all this down, we wanted to make sure that we had a strategy going into every matchup, and it wasn't just like we're playing based on feelings, like I feel like this is the right play, but it turns out it was wrong or whatever. So we're just going to kind of go through and share these things with you, I guess. So if you decide to play this deck at your locals or whatever, you'll have an idea.
Yeah,
So
just sort of like just like Spark Notes
yeah,
almost, like
yeah.
not
Essentially,
really.
it's not like
Yeah,
it's not. We're not telling you how to play the deck. We're just saying this is what we came up with and like our strategy for these matchups. So the first one we'll talk about is the Kuon and Rune matchup. This is the part of the huge reason we call this Tempo Haven is that this matchup is just a tempo matchup for us. We really need to go first, so we have to win that die roll. If we go second, the game is not unwinnable, but it's so hard it might as well feel unwinnable sometimes. One of the big priorities we want is Marwynn Evo on 4. We don't ward in this matchup at all. There's no reason to be warding. They can't really punish us. If you play against people who know how to play this matchup, you got to be careful about them on their turn 3 using Demon Caller Evo to bring that out before your Marwynn turn, because those are ways you, if you don't have answers to those cards on the board, that's how you can lose the matchup because they get too much value and push too much damage. Us not warding, it becomes really bad.
yeah. That's one thing that that's why some early game followers are important, like the Grappler, like the Phantom Blade Wielder, so that they cannot go into their Evo turn and feel comfortable playing down the Demon Caller, because Demon Caller is the scariest shit in the matchup. It's very scary. If they play the 2-drop, the traditional sorceress going first or whatever on 2, pack it up.
Yeah, they know the matchup. They know it good.
Like, you're playing me or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, they know the matchup. Yeah.
Yeah, like when we were testing very heavily, when Pressure started playing traditional sorcerers on 2, it was just so miserable.
Unwinnable.
Yeah. That was part of the reason we thought like the biggest advantage we have and hope for is that people just don't understand this matchup and they were not going to do stuff like that. And every Kuon I played that day did not do that. And yeah, so Forest and the Pixie matchup, we kind of came to the conclusion this is still a resource matchup. We're not trying to like out tempo them or anything. We just want to drain them of their resources, and once they're down to their like 1 to 2 card hand, we take over the game from there. Marwynn on 4 is still very good, but you most likely will have to ward depending on what you think is in their hand or how many pixies, buffs, and stuff happen before then. One of the big things we wrote here in bold, I guess you want to talk?
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, we did some like tests with ward or not ward against fairy, just ward. We just ward. I was like, I think I can not ward. No, just ward. We definitely should just ward. The other thing is, in all caps, play around Liza. Liza is just like they might not be playing it, but if they're playing it and they play it on you, good game. Go get some lunch. It's really rough. I think now with the Black Inscripture, it might be like less rough, but it's still awkward. But just always keep Liza in the back of your mind. Always make plays as if Liza's going to come down next.
If you can make the play to play around it, then do it if you can, and it doesn't hurt you really. Then the next thing too we talked about is if we don't have Marwynn on 4, we need to focus on banishing their fairy dragons because that's just extra resources we don't want to give them. Even if it costs us 2 cards, we wrote that we should still try to banish the card because if we don't want to give them a pixie and a wisp because those are resources that are really important for them to like start getting out of control or just pushing up little bodies over and over again. Because if pixie is just like here's a bunch of like 1/1s on the board, it's kind of annoying for us unless we like have Boost Kicker or have Jeanne, right? And then if they push up a bunch of guys and there's a turn we don't clear all of them and suddenly they're like Fairy Dancer, bounce back to hand, Fairy Dancer, bounce back to hand, Fairy Dancer. It gets out of control and we're like, oh no, like what has happened? The next big thing too is you have to be really considerate of like the Spinaria board setups and things like that. If it looks like they're going to go into a Spinaria turn, you have to have like Jeanne and Boost Kicker to clear the follow-up and clear most of the stuff. Sometimes things will live if they like what's that card called? Fairy Song, I think, right? If they buff their Elf Song, yeah. If they buff their board, sometimes like Spinaria will live with 1 HP or something like that. But it's really important to keep those in mind and hopefully like not waste your board clears until like turns like that are going to happen, or if you absolutely have to.
Yeah, I would definitely say Boost Kicker is like one of the most important cards in this matchup because Spinaria boards, like even if it's not a Spinaria board that gets elf songed, it's still a 5 health thing that John will not clear. And you basically just, if it's possible, you just never want them to have a board. So boost kicker becomes really important in that matchup. But yeah, the only way for them to get wisps, which is when the Spinaria boards get out of hand, is with the Elven Princess Mage, because we're going to try to banish the fairy dragons every time. I'd even say, like, if you can't banish the fairy dragon, just try to ignore it, as best as possible, as best as you can. And then I'd say another thing is don't swing Phantom Blade. This is definitely a Phantom Blade like favorite matchup, right? Like if Phantom Blade lives for a couple times, it's going to be really sick for you. And the other very important, this to me is like one of the most important things in this matchup, is they have removal options, but if they play it, it's extremely slow. So Lily, when it comes down, is going to be turn 3 or 4, and they're going to remove your thing, and they might draw a card, because Lily is a broken card. But they're still slowing their game plan down because they just spent their entire turn removing one of the things, and they have a 2/4. And you don't really care about your early game things. So it's just easy. Okay, surefire pass or whatever, or just Marwynn Evo, and here we go. But I think that's a really important key to this matchup, is that forcing them to use their hard removal. Karula is really sick in this matchup as well, because it's like, okay, I'm playing Karula, you have to answer with your Lily or Rose Gardener. And if you don't, then I'm going to get extra value. And then even if you do, okay, you just wasted your turn, basically. You slowed your turn down because you're not generating fairies, you're not generating buffs, and we just get an extra turn. And as we get farther into the game, more chances of us to play our Lucy down, play our even Marwynn without a skip turn down, and
Yep. Next matchup, Disdain Dragon. This is another matchup you just want to go first. It's a resource game at the end of the day. You don't really have to worry about much else. Don't ever try to race them, because if you start doing stupid stuff like that, you will lose the game because they'll just be better at it. They have this thing called Forte, and it's very scary. One thing to keep in mind too is like we said earlier, we want to banish the early servant plays. Priority is obviously on disciples if possible, but they might think that they can get away with like playing something like on 1 or 2 or whatever, thinking they can just like abuse that we're not going to do anything. If that happens, just get rid of those cards immediately, and their Galmu turns just get worse and worse, right? Because they have less targets in the grave to be able to do the cool thing they want to do.
yeah,
And then
definitely priority on the disciple for sure, since servant, they have to be an overflow. And if we're going first, they won't have overflow on the turn that they Gamu. Obviously, if they oracle, then whatever. But definitely try to prioritize the disciple banishes.
Yeah, for sure. And this is once again another matchup where if you Marwynn on 4, just ward. They just always ward. Yeah. It's a resource game. They like, if they waste a Forte to do 7 damage to your Marwynn, you're pretty happy. They wasted an entire turn, basically just doing that. Yeah, and then but if that happens, it happens. If you don't ward in this matchup, you can lose the game immediately. Especially if they have Evo points, right? It's because they can like Forte and swing in, then like Forte Evo, and then play another Forte. It just
if they have 2 Fortes,
it's just you just lose the game, and you're like, I didn't even get to play the game. Like it sucks. They get to do like 21 face damage immediately or something stupid like that. And also another huge thing, I think people realize this playing into Disdain Dragon in general, or Dragon now, is Feline. Keep in mind of how many they have access to and how many of the spells are still around. The spells are less important, I guess, but it's just that Feline is just such a tempo negative card for us. And it sucks.
Yeah, I think with Feline, it's since this is a really heavy resource game or matchup, the ability to like be able to go, okay, they play Feline and they search and don't get a card. We know that they have a White Frost Whisper in their hand, and White Frost Whisper is better than them having a Gamu,
Yeah.
And it's very like the deck is very combo based, Disdain, I mean, and that they're not able to do things unless they have 2 cards in hand, unless they have Gamu. So the ability to just go, okay, you have 2 cards in hand, and I know one of them is White Frost Whisper, really eliminates a lot of the things you have to keep track of, and think about for some turns.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we're going to our favorite matchup next. We have Control Abyss here. All we really put after all the testing we did was originally it was just a bunch of skull emojis.
Yeah, it's terrible, man. It's so bad. It's so bad. It
Yeah.
made me so angry. I was like, why am I playing this fucking deck, man?
Yeah, the only thing we wrote here that we could possibly think of was just like, hard mull for Sacred Pleas, because if we can get them onto the board, it makes the matchup at least like maybe we can win, but it's still not super favored. We gotta hope they brick a bit to like really have a chance. But for the aggro matchup, obviously we want to go first. It's once again another resource game. You don't want to Marwynn in this game a lot of the times because they actually do have access to Bane, and this is a matchup where you have to think a lot about like, if they have Bane, you can't Marwynn in Ward or something, because they just get to be like, yeah, I give this thing Bane and run Punk Devil in, and then swing it with my other stuff, and you're like, I wasted an entire turn doing that, and it didn't really pay off. They 1-for-1 me, and their card only cost 2 play points. Like that was
I think
really bad.
Yeah, I think that this is probably the only matchup in the meta where like we don't care about Marwynn at all, because we can't ward because they can Punk Devil Rush kill it, and we can't not ward because we take 25 fucking damage the next day in 2 turns,
Yeah.
So definitely this is the one matchup where like we are definitely playing the saviors as a 1 minute removal.
Absolutely. One thing to add really quick too is like they in Control Abyss they always have is it Wings of Lust, I believe. That card can give cards rush, which means they don't need to skip a turn to give rush to have other Punk Devil swing in. Sometimes it's just like they go, Punk Devil, use the effect, draw a discard, and also give this rush, run it in, and now they get a whole another attack phase on top of that too, basically, which is insane for them, and then we just lose the game.
Yeah. We lose the game anyway.
Yeah. The last thing we have wrote here is, watch out for Valnric plays, and if you see Dire Bond or Bad Bee or Apostle of Sonnets or whatever, just keep in mind about those as well, because it changes what type of aggro list they're really on, right?
Yeah, if you see the Apostle, the Bad Bee, the Dire Bond, you kind of know you're more. They're more of the like combo-y like Valneric, gonna try to burst you down deck rather than rather than just the I'm just playing on curve, playing a bunch of things, deck. So just be aware of that.
Yep. Then we have Egg here. Once again, this is a kind of a resource game. If you've played against Egg, you kind of feel that already. We want to go first because they usually want to go first. They can't really abuse their Evo points very well. And this is a life total matchup where we really, really want to protect our life total. So we need to find Lucy and banish cards as soon as possible. If we can banish away some of their ways to do damage, like eggs or even tin soldiers, that's really good for us because they can't cycle it over and over again. And then on this one, we have wrote here, use saviors to banish instead of searching for Marwynn in this matchup for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think banishes are really important. You just have to think every 2 health is 1 less tin soldier like proc. So yeah, and we've known this since set 3. Lucy just shits on this matchup completely. They have to spend 2 cards out of their hand, the non-existent hand, or it's just gonna snowball, and then you just play Lucy and you just win the game from there. Like it's not too hard unless, like Kit said, they hit, what'd you say, 3 Humpties?
They hit 3 Humpties and 3 explosions by turn 6.
As a Shadowverse player does.
Yeah.
Next game? Oh, wait.
Oh, man. And the last thing we have written here was just for Sword. I mean, I'm sure we're missing maybe some matchups or something here, but we just didn't really consider anything else. Sword, once again, is just a resource matchup. You want to go first because they're usually the aggro matchup or an aggro deck. They can abuse Evo points a little bit, but we don't really care. And then the things you want to have in your opening hand are just like early game removal. And then the only way we really lose the game is if, Leo hits the board and we don't have an answer for Leo. And then one of the huge things, this is another one of those matchups too, where we wrote here at the bottom was just don't be greedy. You don't have to swing in with the Karula or Phantom Bladers because we'll find more value with them being untapped, because once again, this is a matchup where Sword doesn't have access to a lot of ways to interact with our standing followers. So if we leave something standing, it's like 99% of the time it's going to live cross turn.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I think that's all our notes. Is there anything else you want to add for any matchups or anything?
Not really. No, not for matchups. No.
Okay, yeah, I think that's it. We made it to the end. I know this is obviously an infinitely longer deck profile thing ever, but this is a huge deep dive for us. We put so much love and sweat into this deck. Yeah, we put a lot of time into this, and hopefully someone else in the community can have a little bit of fun with this deck before it's gone.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously, huge thanks to Pressure. He's the one that kind of like put me towards this list a little bit, and then we started testing it super hard together, and then ever since then we were collaborating so hard together. Like almost every other night we were like in a call playing some matches, and like doom repeal, like, okay, screw this, we're just playing picks.
I definitely don't think I would have been able to do this without you. Like, you brought a lot of ideas and stuff to the table, and I think that we being able to have like two players that have like a similar way of thinking, but not like exact, really helps make a deck instead of just one person, and I think that really goes for this game is being able to throw ideas at people and stuff, and have confidence that they're, the ideas that they're coming back are real or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. We're just both soundboards for each other, where we're like, we say things and do things, and we're like, the other person's like, you're crazy, or you might be onto something, and we'll figure it out together.
We can trust each other and stuff. But yeah, I mean, congrats on getting top 32. I really wish we could, you could have gotten farther, because I really would have loved to see the deck again on stream, because I had mentioned this to Kit one time, but when I played it to him when I was on Kuan, it was like the games that I was like steamrolling him when he didn't see John. I was telling him like, this doesn't feel like a deck, and I definitely feel like the game that we saw on stream was like, I feel like
it was the worst case scenario ever.
I don't know if I told, but me and Skaz watched it in a call. Like I was telling, like we were watching the call. I was talking, and it was like the roughest game I've ever seen of the deck. And it was like, I just can imagine people just going like, what the fuck was Kid playing?
Exactly. Oh man, I can tell you, when I was on stream, like, first of all, when they took me on stream, I was like, oh, I already lost, because it's just stream curse. Stream curse is a thing. Okay, and then on turn 4, on when I top decked and it wasn't Karula, after hard mulling to try to find a Karula, or sorry, not Karula, Marwynn. When I was looking for a servant or Marwynn, like my opening hand, I was like, ditch immediately, look for the servants or Marwynn. Didn't open it. I was like, okay, at least I'm 4 cards deeper. It's probably in the next few cards. We did the math. We put it into geometric calculator, because I wanted to know.
Special.
Yeah, the Weiss special, exactly, for the Weiss players out there who always run that calculator. I wanted to know, what is the likelihood on turn 4 we'll draw Marwynn, and it was about it was 86% in some like point whatever, and we moved around cards and stuff like that, and like no matter what we did, it was like that was kind of the best we could do without like really breaking the deck. And 86% to hit it on going first is a really, really high chance of finding the card you need to win the matchup. So it was really unfortunate that the stream match I had was the one where I essentially bricked, and by turn 4, literally on turn 4, I would have honestly just scooped and like went and like took a break, because I knew this matchup was done. But the problem was I was on stream, so I didn't want to just scoop in the middle of the stream.
I saw the Acolyte. Well, so the minute I knew you were going to lose is turn 2, I saw the Heinlein. I just don't think that is a winnable match. I think Heinlein and Kuan is not winnable. I think if they turbo their Kuans out, it's really rough. But and then when you did Acolytes on the guy, I was like, all right. But then there was like, okay, some light at the tunnel. And then that last turn, we were like, oh my gosh, what is he doing? Or he's misplaying. And then the second D shift, I was like, oh, okay, sure.
Okay. If I don't know how much of the stream like was like exactly what you guys saw, but there was a reason I kept asking for his discard pile, because his deck was like down to 5 cards, and I kept looking in his discard pile, and like every time I did the math in my head, I was like, he only wins if he double D shifts me. I have outs to everything else. I'm at 30 life. How do I lose? So I kept picking his thing. I was looking through. I'm like, there's no D shift in here. Crap, he probably has it in hand, or it's in his deck still, and I put it back. Every turn you saw me do that, I was just looking for the D shift. I was just like, please be in there.
Me and Gaz were thinking that you were looking like because we saw the Lucian hand and we are like, is he? I forgot exactly which turn it was, but I was predicting you're either like looking for how much removal he has to like do like a like sort of like a play a couple guys turn to just have a shot at like him not having the removal, or because you stopped at Surefire once and you stopped at Merlin once. So that's interesting that you were looking for the D shift. I kind of was thinking you were just gonna make some like wide board play, but then you just decided like, okay, there's too much unknown removal that he could have. So let me just
Yeah, it like when I was going through and like counting all the removal and stuff like that, it still felt like I didn't know enough exactly of what I had to play around perfectly. And there was a lot of scenarios where I was like, I could make a Lucifer play here, and if it lives, I could win the game. But I was like, there's no way that's ever going to happen. And it got to the point where I'm like hitting upwards of like I'm hitting the 30 life total, and I'm looking at his deck size, and I was like, I pivoted to like I think the only way I win this game is to deck him out. Or whatever, and hopefully he just doesn't have both D shifts. And obviously he had both D shifts. I was really sad I didn't ever see a D shift hit the grave, because I know whenever he played what's his face Heimlin, I was like, oh, please discard a D shift in there, because I think if I get to the 30 plus life total, and especially with Lucifer, I think it's like almost impossible for them to win with only one D shift. They have to take 2 turns. And,
well, no, if you had the third Kuan, you
oh yeah, but usually at that point, hopefully I have the like removal and stuff for it too as well. But yeah. It's just there's a lot of factors in this matchup that really suck, and there's like a weird path lines for Kuan could take and just like push out a ton of damage. So you can't necessarily always cover all your bases. And at the time, I personally thought my only real out at that point was I have to deck him out. Like I have to hope he doesn't have 2 D shifts, and hopefully he just decks himself out, or get to the point where if he D shifts, he has to draw a card and then he loses the game, right? Because he can't actually D shift. It was just like that was the only light of the tunnel for me at the moment after like looking at everything. But but at the same time, on turn 4 I was ready to scoop, honestly. Like I knew the game was over.
I get that.
Because we've played this matchup so much, we know for a fact it's just over.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, I think we got everything out of the way. Pressure, thank you for doing this video with me. Thank you so much for working on this list with me. Thank you for going through the turmoil and everything. I wish we could come across like our emotions were crazy building this deck. We were on this roller coaster ride of madness.
If we ever do this again, we'll have to record some of the stuff just for the little like outtakes.
That's such a good idea. If we do something like this again, I'll start recording like all our play sessions and stuff, so we can record the shit we're saying. Because dude, we were both like at some point pressure was like breaking down, and I'm over here trying to keep them together. Then I'm breaking down. I'm like, I don't know, dude. And Pressure's like, no, I think this is it.
Yeah.
It was a crazy experience running this putting this together. It was just so much fun, and I think even if I went 0-2 or whatever, at the end of the day I had a lot of fun doing this with you. So
no, me too. That's what I was gonna say, is this was like way better, like way more fun of an experience than locking in Kuan and just whatever, for sure. And like I said, I don't think I would have been able to like make this exact list without you, and I think this is the perfect 40. I think this is the list. Outside of, we talked, maybe Karula swap in, but I think with the stuff we had, it's either this list or play a different deck. I think everything else is kind of coping. We were in cope mode anyway.
Yeah, so. we were huffing the hopium and copium. It was crazy, and I agree a lot too. Like, I think individually we both would have come to this list, but together this collaboration was it was a I'm gonna say it was art.
It was a masterpiece. It was magic.
It was.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Well, with that being said, guys, I hope for you guys that made it to the end, thank you so much for even listening to this entire thing. I'm sure some of you guys listen to this at work and have something to have on in the background or whatever. Thank you for subscribing to this channel and liking the content and stuff like that. So I really appreciate it. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that. Pressure, do you have anything to say before I end everything here?
Yeah, two shout outs. One shout out to my buddy Captain. He got top 8. I'm really happy for him. It was great to meet him in person. And to my first round opponent, please stop cheating. Please. It's really
Oh yeah, please. That first round person, I saw him cheat, so I can confirm it.
On
Yeah.
Bushi on the Discord's name's framework. It's either cheating or just like tighten the game up or tighten the gameplay up. It's really fucking stupid, and really ruined the weekend for me. But other than that, I'm glad you made top 32. And yeah, I'm ready to take a break from this game.
Me too. I'm taking a nice break myself as well. I can't anymore. That we put too much emotion into this. It's drained the crap out of me.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.